All right. Thank you first off for joining us today. How many people got 10,000 steps walking over to this, just to this meeting? All right. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So having a 16-year-old boy and an 18-year-old boy, it looks like I'm watching or waiting for a bunch of people to start playing Fortnite. It's just kind of interesting. This is my first time presenting to a bunch of DJs in the audience. But my name is Brian Emerson, Chief Product Officer at New Relic. And I'm excited for this session. So there's a couple things we're going to do. Number one, I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about New Relic, some of the things that we're focused on, how we're thinking about the future of observability from our perspective, and what does that mean from an investment standpoint? Like, where are we investing our R&D dollars? How are we thinking about the future? And I'm going to bring up a couple of panelists, customers of New Relic, to talk about their own perspective. And part of this is just to kind of riff on what does the future of observability look like? What are some of the things that we need to think about? What are going to be some of the roadblocks in allowing us to achieve more intelligence in our observability environments? But before I get started, I just want to get a little bit of a landscape of the room. So if you're a developer, raise your hand. Okay. What about like platform engineering, SRE, half and half? Any like product managers, business owners? A few product managers. Then IT. I'll throw IT out there. One person from IT? Okay, well, welcome. All right, so we're going to jump into it. First off, just a little bit about New Relic. I know some of you know New Relic well. Lots of big numbers up here. I think the thing that we're most proud of as a company is we have been rated a leader in the observability space for quite a long time, right? We got our roots in APM. We've obviously expanded into a full observability stack. And a lot of where we're focused our energy now is how do we derive, based on the data sets we have in our platform, how do we derive better insights that help you more effectively run your applications, run your platforms, and support the business. 85,000 customers. We added 4,000 new customers over this last year. And the thing I think that's just so interesting to me is the Chief Product Officer is the folks that I get to engage with, and also the brands that are relying on our platform and the resilience our platform provides to the services that they're providing to their end customers. So you can see a few of them here. I just wanted to expand it out a little bit, right? So we're really proud of the fact that we have some of these brands that are using our platform on a daily basis to support their mission critical applications and services. We just recently ran a state of observability study with almost 2,000 participants, some New Relic customers, some not New Relic customers. And I just wanted to put it up here. I'm not going to go through all of these key points, but the number one thing that still kind of hampers us in this entire space is the cost of outages, right? And I think as all of you know, you're probably running and supporting infrastructure that's revenue generating, that's supporting revenue generating applications. Every time those applications go down, you're having to manage this. A good observability strategy can cut that loss in half, right? So if you're spending $2 million every time per hour every time you have an outage, we can cut that in half by having a good observability strategy, but it also has to be the right one. The second thing is obviously the AI driver. You've probably been around this conference. Has anyone been in a session where somebody didn't talk about AI? I really want to know what that session is after I don't know how to communicate with you, but I need to know what that session is. AI is the number one driver. Look, the way I kind of look at AI is, at the core, it's another element in the stack, right? So, you know, I was around in the days of like VMs all of a sudden became a thing, and you're like, hey, there's a new management layer and something we have to manage. Containers came out, same thing. At the core, there's some element of that from an observability standpoint, right? New elements in our applications that we need to make sure are reliable and available. The one really interesting thing that we're going to get into as we have our panel discussion is there's also this non-deterministic element that AI provides inside of the application. And like, what is our role in observability of helping there? And it's kind of like this merging of what business requirements and what the business cares about with what platform engineering and developers need to care about in supporting the things that the business needs. All right, I'm also just going to do a quick plug. These are the capabilities that we announced this week in terms of integrations with Amazon. The first one I want to highlight is really the agentic solutions. And so think about this as two-way integrations. A couple of capabilities from Amazon being able to call out to New Relic and ask questions. Hey, there's an issue going on in the environment. Tell me what's going on, right? Like, go and talk to New Relic and come back with an answer. Right, so that's a one-way integration that we have with AWS DevOps Agent and also Amazon Quick Suite. And then on the flip side, we're also using, from a New Relic AI perspective, we're tying into Amazon Q Business Index. And that allows us to pull a lot of business context into New Relic. So when we're looking at things like how do you correlate observability metrics to business outcomes, we can start pulling in some of the business insights that exist there directly into the New Relic platform and be able to provide visibility and insights straight from our UI. The second area is around auto discovery, making it very easy to be able to onboard your cloud environments into New Relic. And then the last area that we highlighted is around security, right? Helping you understand from a developer perspective when you have vulnerabilities and what's the best automated path to be able to resolve those. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. I would say if you have more interest in these integrations in particular, please stop by our booth. I know the venue is very large, but if you have any questions on where our booth is after the session, feel free to come up to me or one of us can help answer that for you. All right, the vision. So the vision statement for us is system of intelligence for the AI age, right? We are an observability platform, but a lot of where observability started was the simplest way I think about it is like dashboards, and then there's kind of intelligence, right? And the start of observability was really around dashboards, and we're looking at a bunch of metrics, and we're kind of surfacing those up. I think the next generation is all about what are the insights that we can actually derive from those metrics. So you're not having to go and fish for answers. The system is literally providing answers for you and getting to a world where it's acting on your behalf, right? And I want to show you, I think the best way to paint kind of a picture of what this looks like is to actually walk through and show you guys a quick vision demo of the way that we see the world shaping up. All right, here we go.
Good morning, Alex. What could have been a long night wasn't, because I responded to an emerging pattern in your system that would have eaten into your business. Between 2:03 and 2:28 a.m., checkout latency surged, and while your other services are fine, I checked, customers began abandoning their carts. By increasing trace sampling, I identified the root cause, a delay in the fraud check microservice triggered by a recent database update. To stabilize performance, I auto-scaled your performance cluster and brought it back down when load reduced, so your cloud cost spend is still in line with your budget, and created Jira tickets for a rollback and patch development. With system health and e-commerce back up, I ran code analysis and made configuration updates that cut the microservice's query time in half, saving you over 100 hours of engineering. To keep your system in an ideal state, I updated runbooks, dialed in alert thresholds, and built game day simulations before updating the AI models and knowledge graphs. To prevent future issues, I ran simulations across your various usage scenarios to identify likely points of failure or degradation. The findings are in the performance inbox with code change suggestions to resolve them. And to push back on risk, I reviewed active vulnerabilities and found 3 at-risk hosts in production that I have flagged for remediation. The owning teams have Jira tickets with remediation steps waiting. I also analyzed network traffic over the last 24 hours and found no anomalous activity that would indicate an attack. From finding a root cause, to engineering excellence, to controlling costs, I'm here to keep your business moving in the right direction. So, where now?
All right, and so in the next like 20 minutes or so, we're going to kind of riff on this idea of the future of observability. A lot of things that you just saw a video of. How do we make these things come to life? And what are some of the things we need to think about on our journey? So give me one more second. Just going to do a quick swap back to slides. All right, and I'm welcoming up Carrie and Steve. Come on up and join me. Everyone, a little bit of a hand. But by the way, if you're ever in the position of presenting and listening to, like watching a video and you can't actually hear what everyone else is hearing, it's a very strange feeling, like sitting there waiting. Like, it's anticipation. Thanks, guys. Hey.
Hey. Good to see you.
Good to see you again.
I just saw you
right.
like 5 minutes ago.
Yes, you saw me 5 minutes ago, and probably like an hour before that. Welcome. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Let's just get started. I think let's go with some introductions. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, the role you play, the company you work for, maybe a little bit about what the company does if it's not obvious, and we'll go from there.
Okay, Kerry Hadi, VPE at Ancestry.com. As you probably imagine, it's largely family history business, and then also the largest consumer genomics company in the world. And so that's our two-pronged focus. Been there for 21 years, so forever. And that's me.
Cool.
I'm Steve Evans. I was formerly with Chegg. It's an ed tech that helps college students. I wrapped my time up with them about a month ago, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next.
Cool. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining the conversation. All right, so one of the things that I kind of hinted on as we got started here is this notion of intelligence. Right? And I wanted to just dive into that as a starting point. And whether you're thinking about it in terms of, like AI or just intelligence in general, when you think about your observability mission, the things that you're focused on from an observability standpoint, how do you think about the word intelligence and what it means to getting the job done? Maybe I'll start with Steve.
Okay.
So when I think about observability and I think about intelligence and where we're heading towards, if we rewind the clock 10 years, we spent a lot of time thinking about infrastructure. What was the CPU on this server? Is this server healthy? And then microservices came along, ephemeral compute came along, a lot of the stuff that AWS and other cloud compute platforms enabled for us. And honestly, I don't really care about infrastructure anymore. Infrastructure is just there to serve a purpose, right? Especially in a microservices world, if infrastructure is unhealthy, honestly, it's AWS's job to deal with that. If the application's healthy, I don't care about the infrastructure. I see the future of development in general, tech in general, but especially around observability, continuing to move up that stack. I often talk about, do I care what the error rate of a microservice is if the user experience is happy? Like, if users can log in, if users can check out, if users can have the experience they're supposed to have, is the underlying application health truly important? Now, obviously it is, because that's what drives that user experience. But with the complexity growing, continue complexity growing, how we think about observability and that intelligence layer really needs to move up that stack. And then we let platforms, our observability platforms, really deal with how should we be thinking about the health of the applications, how's that driving the usability, the user experience piece of that. I think, continuing to think about like, oh, the error rate of this service being above 3.2% is a problem. As humans, we're just not going to be able to keep up with that for much longer. We really have to continue to move up that stack on the intelligence piece.
I think that the interesting thing about that too is also the alignment that you then need to have in your role of observability with like what the business cares about, right? When you think about digital experience, like are the goals of the product manager, the business around that service, are they aligned with the way that you're thinking about like the things you're measuring in observability? And I think oftentimes
100%.
there's just the gap, right? Like the observability is like, hey, the application's healthy. Okay, especially when AI is introduced, there's this whole notion of, but you don't know if the experience is good, right? Like bad returns from prompts could drive a horrible user experience even though the system is saying green.
Absolutely. And if you rewind the clock 10 years, you used to be able to have the infrastructure team say, oh, CPU's at 87%, that's a problem, let's go fix it, and ignore the development team. We're really not in the world where infrastructure teams and development teams can't talk together anymore. We're moving towards a world where tech teams and business teams have to continue to talk more and more together. Like all these worlds, AI is driving a world where roles are merging together more and more. The Venn diagrams are overlapping. We're going to have to see this more and more in how we think about observing not just the tech stack, but also the user experience, the business world. All of this is, to me, is coming together.
Cool. I love it. Carrie?
Yeah, and,
What's your take?
yeah, when I think of observability, it's a tool that we use. The primary purpose is the revenue, right, of your company. And as tech people here, this is one part of how we get there. And as most companies are, they only care about observability when it goes wrong. The customers are impacted, the site's down, then suddenly they care. And so, like you, we lifted and shifted, many years ago to the cloud, and it's a big journey. Observability, it's not something it's ever done. And so if you think, oh, we're not quite there yet, I've been, doing. I think we've moved 8 years ago, and we're still doing it. It's always a work in progress. At one point, we used to have a big problem with, kind of site-wide problems where it impacted, thousands and hundreds of thousands of customers. And now we've kind of gotten past that, and now it's down to the, individual errors. How can we get rid of those from a very small subset of people? And so I imagine that's how you should look at it. It's really this journey that you're on, and don't ever beat yourself too much up, because we're all figuring it out under a shifting platform underneath us, and so that's how I look at it. It's a tool for revenue, and it has to be there. So.
Yeah, I mean, and part of the way we're thinking about it at New Relic is how do we surface up some of the business, call it the business KPIs or metrics, that product managers in the business care about inside of New Relic, right? And that helps, I think, create tighter alignment between the goals that you have in terms of managing your observability stack with the way the business actually thinks about success, and whether that's revenue success, like user experience, like you mentioned, or other things, that it's actually married together. So to me, I think one of the most important trends, especially with the introduction of AI and kind of the blurring of lines that you talked about, is the communication between everybody sitting in the audience right now and your business counterparts is going to be more and more important. Are you actually aligned and calibrated against the same goals? And then how do you actually measure that from a tooling perspective? And I think oftentimes there's bifurcation in the tool sets that both sides use. I think we're going to see over time a merging of those together, and we're trying to look at opportunities for us to represent that in a unique way inside of the New Relic platform.
Yeah, and I see the same thing at Ancestry. We just built an internal, we call it user business events, and it's run out of Redshift because we have to store it separately than traditional observability metrics around CPU and memory. All those types of observability metrics that we track. I think the future is that you would have business observability, and then you'd have more infrastructure observability, and I'm hoping that somehow we could expand the term observability out there, because I have to do it myself now.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a stitched together project, right? Like
Yeah.
you want it to be out of the box and curated.
That's right, yeah. And if you were to ask the board, they think of observability as a business observability. Like how performance to them is business performance. It's not how fast the site loads. And so typically us in this room, we use all these terms that the business owners use differently, and we're not doing enough to observe that part of the business.
Okay, cool. So let's switch topics a little bit and just talk about the data that exists inside of the observability stack. Like, who in the organization needs to have access to it or use it? And is it expanding to different personas in the organization? We kind of mentioned the business, mentioned product managers, obviously platform engineering is like the key user of it. But do you see as part of the future that the observability stack starts moving out and having broader scope in terms of who cares about the data that the New Relic platform is providing to you?
Who here's a developer?
Lots of them, half of them.
Do you care about observability data? No? Wait, like half the room raised their hand, and then no one raised their hand when I said, do you care about observability data? I mean, you're sitting here, so I assume you do. So you said platform engineering mostly cares about it.
Developers care about it.
Developers better care about it,
What
right?
about beyond that?
Yeah.
What about beyond that?
Beyond the tech team.
The tech teams. That's a good point.
Okay.
Let's call it that.
Thank you. I just wanted to.
Go ahead. What
Yeah,
would you
then
say?
No, you go
How
ahead.
would you answer the question?
Well, again, I think it goes back. I loved how you framed it of the board or in the C-suite and the business think when they hear observability, they think about orders, revenue. I mean, let's be really clear. If they could drive as much revenue without having to spend as much as they do on tech, they would do it in a heartbeat. That's just the way the world works, right? The reason we invest in tech is because in our modern world, that's how we drive revenue for most companies, especially companies that participate in reInvent. Now, the big disconnect we've had is that too often on the tech side, we don't think of our job as driving the business. We think of it as driving tech. And I think especially with what's happened in the last few years with AI and moving forward, you're going to see this come together more and more as technologists who don't understand the need to drive business outcomes are going to struggle more and more. Now, so I think that's going to drive the need to bring together observability in service of business outcomes. And it's kind of getting back to what we've already talked about. Now, to the notion of like, who does observability data serve? Who does observability data serve? I think the most underutilized audience is the developer. I think too often the developer gets really interested in observability when there's an issue, when there's a production issue in particular. And I think the massive underserved opportunity is when is in the development process. When there's a bug that you're trying to track down, when you're in you're developing a feature and there's a performance issue, when you're trying to focus on scalability issues, when you're trying to get ahead of issues. I think that's the massive untapped potential of observability. I've been harping on you guys for years on this. Brian's been with the company for 6 weeks, so I love picking on him for everything I've been harping on New Relic for years. Most companies, they spend $10 on engineers, and they spend $2 on their cloud platform, they spend $1 on observability, roughly, round numbers, right? And then they spend a lot of time thinking about how do they reduce the cost of the cloud and how they reduce the cost of observability. As opposed to how do they optimize the cost of the actual humans that are working on all these problems, right? And I think the massive untapped potential is use observability data to increase speed of development, to how fast you track down bugs, to how much you can optimize site performance if that's the area that company's focusing on, to whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I think when you start getting in that direction, that's where like AI becomes interesting and getting back into insights, right? Like,
Absolutely.
hey, what's the work that the system can go and do on behalf of the developer, so it's not the developer having to track these things down themselves, right? It's just like, hey, here's the things that we think are kind of like that are wonky that are going on in your system that you need to take a look at. And then potentially like, hey, we've taken actions because we know some of these wonky things actually are going to cause issues. Had we not taken action? So getting back to the vision demo that we showed, right? I think that's the opportunity, right? So you look at that persona and you're like, hey, underserved maybe in terms of how do they get more out of observability? It's the opportunity to say, let insights be the way that you kind of serve the development community what they need to become better developers, like more efficient.
Yeah, the only thing I add to that is the video really focuses on here's what happened in production overnight. I would just extend that to, and by the way, we notice you have this SQL query that you're writing that you haven't released yet, and that your SQL query is crap. Here's a better version of that SQL query that will have the same outcome, but when you have 1,000 concurrent users, you're not going to fall over, by the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then adding to that, we all have years worth of incident data of problems that have happened on the site. How can AI look at my individual, not your data, but my data, because we have different applications, and use that to forward warn me, hey, this is on the path to disaster here, but so start raising the alarms before it affects very many users, because we already have seen that path before. So use that to warn me, not just fix problems quickly when they happen. So that's that would be the holy grail for me.
Yeah, and then you get into the fact that in a lot of cases, applications are dependent on other applications, right?
Sure.
So like it starts creating a list of dependencies that you have to manage. I think that kind of leads us into hard truths. Like, what are some of the hard truths and like getting this right that we just have to you just have to manage on a day-to-day basis when you think about, okay, I've got a strategy, I've got a goal I'm trying to achieve in terms of moving observability more to insights. Like what gets in the way, or what do you guys see getting in the way there?
I think a big challenge is the alerting, the amount of alerting. Is it too much? Is it not enough? Same with traces. Getting that right. What we're logging. All those three, I think, is the foundation of saying how quickly can we recover from an incident and start making money again. And too often, we're alerting on everything, and then everyone just starts ignoring all of them, or there's too many gaps in our alerting, and then we don't notice anything until a customer calls. So that's been our challenge over the years, is what's the right balance. And we're getting better at that, but we for sure don't have all the answers yet either.
Yeah, and you're bringing up a good point, right? Because it's like it's a world of, you're dealing with complexity in the sense of there's applications that are different life cycles, right? Like you have legacy applications you're having to manage that might be driving a big part of the business that don't move as fast, right? That have like a different way you need to think about like telemetry around that app than maybe your more modern apps. And it's just like the mix of all of that together is like, what's the right recipe to make sure you're not, like hammering folks with noise, but then also like not providing enough insights or enough noise for them to like make better decisions.
And our applications are changing. All of a sudden, someone showed up one day. Hey, you have to have MFA on everything, Carrie. And so all of a sudden that opened up a whole new suite of problems. And so everything's shifting underneath us at the same time. But the general concept is you have to get alerting and tracing right, or you'll get too much noise or too little noise, and so that's my opinion.
Okay.
Steve?
We had lunch to kind of talk through what we're going to talk about, and he just stole my answer. I just want to point that out for the record.
I did?
Yeah.
I didn't think the way you phrased it was very good.
So, what was the question? Hard truths, I think is the way you phrased it.
Hard truths.
I think the hard truth is the fundamentals are super important. So I completely agree with you, as I hate to admit that. Carrie and I have known each other for a long time. So if I was to show up somewhere, unless it was a super well-oiled machine, 9 times out of 10, the place I would start is I would want to look at what's your retrospective process. Now, a lot of places call it postmortems. Just quick aside, I came from a place that was in the health tech industry. In health, postmortems involve a dead body in the room. So we call them retrospectives, and that's just stuck with me for 10 years now. So retrospectives. I'm very forgiving of mistakes. It's the mistakes you repeat that I'm very unforgiving of. And retrospectives are the opportunity for the organization to learn from our mistakes. And so, like you talked about, the missing alert, or what often is the bigger problem, the 8 alerts that add no value. And so what I would be looking for in an organization is, what is your process to, when you have something go wrong, how do you learn from it? What did go well, but more importantly, what didn't go well? How did the bug make it into production? But more importantly, Why didn't we detect it as quickly as we wanted to? Why wasn't it mitigated? Why did that bug cascade into a larger customer impact than it needed to be? What were the alerts that detected it? What are the alerts we had this week that went off that added no value? When I started at Chegg 8 years ago now, our SRE team was getting paged about 150 times a week. And we were not having 150 incidents a week, thankfully. And we were only having about 100. And we just started doing some really simple reporting of like, hey, we got paged 45 times for this one thing last week. Why? Like, what did you do to fix it? And we just started working through those one by one. This really simple, basic stuff, right? But it starts clawing you back to stop making the stupid mistakes and start making the hard mistakes, right? And getting yourself into a healthy place. So then you can start focusing on how do you up level into the intelligence stuff? How do you start really focusing on true business value? And you know, start really elevating the craft to where we all want to be operating. That's my hard truth.
I have another hard truth.
Okay, well, I love it.
So, you know, I started off at Ancestry as a Java developer, and one of the last things I wanted to do was add observability data a lot through the software development lifecycle, and so that's that. So I see that a lot with the developers, and I'm sure you have the same challenge, which is how do you get other people in the corporation to care as much as you do about this information? And so I'd say, you know, you just got to be vigilant at it and point it out when it's not happening. And you can't just keep carrying this tech debt from project to project and only care about observability once you have a problem. And so, you know, make sure you're talking to your senior directors, VPs, and making it a topic of conversation to not carry this tech debt forward.
Cool. And then, you know, because both of you brought up alerts, right? And alerts can be noisy. Do you have the right ones? One of the things that we're developing and releasing early next year is this notion of smart alerts. And it's both helping with the configuration and setup of alerts to begin with to make it simple, but then also alerts that can tune themselves over time, right? So getting back to this problem of if the system can help kind of optimize the alerts for the right band of how much noise are they creating and how do you get to the right level of noise when it's the maybe it's not noise at that point, it's like insights because it's the most meaningful things that actually make sense. And to understand when there's things that we can remove for low frequency and high frequency.
When's that going to release?
So that's early.
I've needed that for a long
There's going to be a preview in February. February will be our
February
review.
what?
That's a commitment. Write
February
that
of this next year.
February 1st?
26th
February 29th. Yeah.
Is it a leap year?
for them.
Is it a leap year? 28th? 28th, 29th?
Let's move on.
That's funny. Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on. But I would say, like, just getting back to if that resonates with you of like, yep, the alerting is something that is like we're still trying to get a handle on. I definitely just encourage everyone to take a look at that and happy post this session if you have any questions on that to answer them for you. All right, advice. And I don't know, maybe the advice and the hard truths kind of go together.
Yeah.
But any, like, if you just think about like parting advice on the observability journey, the working with New Relic, maybe wherever you want to take it, like what would be your parting words here?
I mean, that has a lot of overlap over what we just talked about. The piece I'd add is don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. I think I hear a lot like, oh, we need this additional data. Oh, we need, we don't have traces enabled here. We don't have, like, there's so much you can do with where you're at. And don't let the lack of something keep you from making progress with what you do have. There's always, like, there's an infinite amount of data you can bring into your observability stack. It's a very long tail of value. And so what you have is the most valuable data you have because it's what you have. Go. Add data once once you hit a gap, then you can worry about adding data.
Mine would be, get your data right now, because what you're gearing up for is the AI ops, right? The promise of AI ops. And so now is the time that you've got to get your your data in the right place to be ready for that, so it can act and serve you. Same type of another one. Don't get too depressed of all the problems you're having. Everyone else is having them too. You just don't work for that other company. And don't let a great incident problem stop you from putting a lot of new infrastructure in place to prevent that type of things in the future. Yeah, over and over. Use that and grow and be happy with the progress you're making, because we're all doing the same thing. But again, the main thing is you've got to get your observability data right. You've got to, if they're coming from multiple sources, you've got to figure out a way to combine them. So then when AI ops is mature enough that it's useful, that you'll be ready to hit the ground running. But you can't just assume that's going to solve your data incongruencies.
Don't use US East 1.
And my advice is I almost go back to the advice I give my kids is that relationships matter so much. And the reason I say that is I feel like in the world of agentic, and it maybe gets back to the rounding out this conversation, how often are you going and talking to your business counterparts or product managers and aligning on the metrics? Because those are going to matter more than anything. And I think in a world where technology tends to be one of these things that disconnects us a lot. As organizations, it's those connections and relationships, and alignment is part of those relationships that help make sure that the investments you're making around observability and whatever features you're focused on actually align to things that are creating the right outcomes for at the end of the day, the business.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. As AI makes technology easier, the relationships, the people, the non-technical parts is going to become more and more important, even in the tech field.
Yep, 100%. So go out and have a conversation. Maybe that's the best advice.
Take these headphones off, go talk to someone.
Okay, so with that, we left a lot of time for Q&A. It turns out that this is not a very good way to be able to do Q&A. And so I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna stop here. I'm gonna say thank you very much, first of all, to both of you. Hopefully this was an informative session. Part of what we wanted to do is just kind of get just some thinking going, right? Maybe, obviously you go through a lot of sessions looking at features and lists of features, but you kind of step back for a second, what are we trying to do? And what's the right way to approach it? Hopefully you came away with some nuggets. Really appreciate the time. Thank you everyone for the 10,000 steps to get over here. And if you have any questions for us, number one, you can come up. Number two, come and meet us at our booth. Other than that, have a great rest of the conference. Thank you.